Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cryptocurrent. Your host here, Richard Carthon. And today I got a very special guest all the way out in Toronto, Canada. We have Dylan with btw.com. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. It's a beautiful day. And here in Toronto, at least, I don't know where, the listeners will be listening, but that always lightens your mood when the weather is good.
Absolutely. And, really excited to learn more about your exchange and everything that you have going on with that. But before we kind of dive into that, how about you give us a little bit of background on yourself? Yeah.
So I was actually born and raised in Des Moines, Iowa, believe it or not. My dad is from Canada. So I ended up, this is a really long story and I'm not going to get into that part of it, but okay. ended up finding myself going to school, university in Canada, and really was focused on sort of transgressive sort of social movements and social theory, and took sociology. And so it was a little bit of like almost like a communist radical. I wanted to change the world. I got into academia and decided, I guess, almost when I was close to finishing up my thesis, that that world just wasn't for me. I wanted to get into quote unquote the real world, with all due respect to academics. And so I started, I had a bunch of itinerant jobs, and I got into crypto. Can I get to the crypto part?
Oh, absolutely. So go ahead, tell us about what year was it? How did you learn about it? And let's start there.
Well, I was very much a regular guy, in the sense that, I wasn't, I had some academic background and stuff like that, but I wasn't, I wasn't in finance. I wasn't in banking. I wasn't, I didn't go to Wharton School for Business. I didn't, there was nothing.
Something you kind of stumbled into.
Yeah. In a way, I kind of stumbled into it, but my brain was very primed for it because I'm just a voracious reader, and I'd been into a variety of subjects for a long time, ranging from as I said, I was in academics, I was into social theory. So I was really into thinkers like Durkheim and Weber and Marx, and then later a lot of like postmodern theory. And so this idea that like the world we experience now, this broad concept, the world we experience now, we tend to accept it as, it's concrete. It's what it is. It's always going to be this way. And we take it for granted that it is the way it is. But when we start peeling the layers back of, history, when we start peeling the layers back of like taken for granted this, why are things the way they are? We start to realize, well, they're all just really extensions of our own imagination. Everything that we see around us, our buildings, our financial institutions, our law systems, et cetera, it's really just like an extension of our imagination of ways we go about solving problems that we have as humans. So
constructs of a vision.
Yeah, precisely. So I was very primed for like hearing, I guess, the message of, at that time, I guess it was late 2010, the first time I heard about Bitcoin.
Early.
And it was 2011. Pretty early, yeah, because I was really into cypherpunk stuff and like William Gibson, and then that led me to like Neuromancer. I was really into that book. I don't know if anybody knows it. Like, it's relatively well known in some circles. And it ended up like inspiring some movies like Blade Runner and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I sort of like got into an adjacent part of that, which was like cypherpunk. There's like cyberpunk plus cryptography. Yeah. And I started getting into that. So I was primed for that. And then I like read this Metafilter article like a year later, I think it was in 2011, about these crazy people that, I don't know if it's like crazy, but it was like, that are into like Bitcoin and stuff like that, and explained it a little bit. And then that was when I got and read the white paper. Even after that, I mean, I was still pretty rational, so I wasn't relatively, and I was also poor. So it was also really hard to get, it was relatively hard to get Bitcoin unless you started your own like mining situation.
Yeah, it was a challenge.
Or got into a pool. Yeah. So I didn't really start getting into it from like the aspect of mining and stuff like that, or like really, or acquiring it until I think 2012, late 2012, 2013. And then 2013 was a huge bull run.
Yeah.
And then, then it became a little bit of a phenomenon. And then Mt. Gox and all this other, and then, we had quite a bear market for a bit and a huge drop. And then everybody sort of forgot about it for a couple of years. In the meantime, I'm here in Toronto, and the Ethereum community is kind of starting to come up, and got involved in the community here a little bit. We started like evangelizing to my friends and family, and I took part in the Ethereum ICO. And then I just over like, I don't know, almost 10 years, it's been just this growing. Yeah. So,
and it's really cool that you were able to get in as early as you did, and you got in through other passion, right? So through the cypherpunk movement, and then you learned about this opportunity, and at the time didn't have the financials to be able to necessarily jump in as much as you wanted to, but you still found a way to get involved. And from that, then you learn about Ethereum, you start getting involved with that, and so years progress, everything's starting to build up, and you have all this momentum. At what point did you say like, wow, this is an opportunity that like I potentially want to build a career around?
That's that's a really, really good question. Well done on the interviewer side. No problem. That's a great question, because that was something I battled with for like a long time, like years. I was like, I think this is something, but everybody thinks I'm crazy, and you kind of like in these sorts of things, you doubt yourself. The thing I could always come back to as I envision, like there's the practical side, obviously, and then there's the sort of like philosophical side where you're like, I got to do this because I just got to do this. And then there's like, I need, I have children, or I have, a mortgage, or whatever it is in your life. You have to make sure you handle that business. And it's like, so anyway, for me, it was like, I could always come back, my conviction about it, I could always come back to really mathematics, and history. So, double entry, bookkeeping hasn't, the last time that the field of accounting was innovated upon was almost 1,000 years ago. Minus 30 years, which was 70 AD, Pliny the Elder came up with double entry bookkeeping. So, I knew that an innovation on the field of accounting, which if you want to restrict, blockchain and Bitcoin just to that narrow thing, is massive. That's a millennial type level, or millennium level type innovation, right? It happens every 1,000 years or something like that, or even longer. So, and then, I had done a lot of stuff in terms of my own personal research on the internet and things like that. And then I saw some trends, with respect to, like, I grew up during like Napster and stuff like that. So the internet was great for information, like copying information and spreading it and everything like that. But it's, it just was sort of half formed when it came to valuable things or things of value. Like, you don't want, for example, if I was going to like give you, like, have 100 people and give out $1, to a crowd, you want to make sure that I'm like not going into the back room and like printing more dollars.
Inflating it. The value, I mean, what does the value really mean at that point?
Yeah. So your question about when I decided to get real, it took some time, and I had to really judge my practical stuff. But I could always come back to the math of it and the history of it and what I saw as a serious innovation in the field of value, really, right? Like, so it was probably 2014 by the time I decided I would definitely somehow find my way into this. So 2014, I literally started adding I searched blockchain in LinkedIn and added every single person I could find.
That's
that
awesome.
was like, that was every day.
Yeah.
and then tried to start making connections that way. And then, at that time, the community was small enough. People would, talk to you.
Go out of their way, strike up conversations and just learn from each other.
Yeah. So that was the timing. And then I was just like trying to, I was on the outside looking in for a very long time. So if there's anybody now who feels like, and just for perspective, because in 2013 or 14, on Bitcoin Talk, I'd like find random friends and we'd be like, man, this sucks. We're like totally not early adopters. And I wish we could like build some in space, but it's just taken up by like, people have way more experience than us and smarter than us and all this stuff. Right. So it's don't get dissuaded from jumping into this area because it's still a very, very new area. Absolutely. I spent a lot of time thinking I couldn't do it just by not jumping into it. And I think the timing is actually better now than it was, 4 or 5 years ago, in the sense that there's way more market acceptance. So if you're a scrappy, smart young person, who wants to like start something, like VCs and everybody is like, they're way more open to that message than they were, 3 or 4 years ago, I think.
Absolutely. And you bring up a lot of points in the fact that making that decision to jump in like all the way in is one, challenging, but even in the sense of just starting and just like doing the first things, getting your foot in the door. I mean, obviously all the audience who's listening to this and whoever, shares it with other people, this is your first introduction into it. And it's a great way to be able to learn about this space, but then also to take action steps into like getting involved in either purchasing your first cryptocurrency or finding a cool technology or blockchain project that you want to go and help build. Whatever it is a prime time, and it's still super early in this space, regardless. Whatever anyone tells you, it is still very early. And so what I kind of want to do now, so like, in 2014, you decide like, all right, this is something I want to do. And then like, I'm sure there's a lot that happens along the way, but then we bring us to current day 2020. And now you have, BTW. Tell us a little bit about this exchange. When did you build it? Where are you currently at in it? And what is the projection for what you're trying to do with that project?
Yeah. So, we're obviously like pretty serious about it because btw.com is not like an easy domain to get, nor is it cheap.
That's an investment.
So it's quite an investment. We definitely the sort of so yeah, just to answer your question, that's getting the domain and stuff like that happened in the past couple of years, and we decided just in the last year and a half or so that we would really, start ramping up on this project and trying to make it go. So what I saw, obviously, the exchange business is there's so many exchanges. There's so much to choose from. What I saw was an increasing commoditization of exchanges. So there's a very low cost of switching from, this exchange to that exchange to that exchange. There's a lot of people who are like, well, I'll just go here because I'm going to get XYZ, benefit. Right.
Right.
And that is probably to be expected as there's more competition that comes into a space. Exchanges, I think my whole thing coming into this project, and I'm certainly not the only one, leading it, but I'm a co-founder, so I'm one of the most important ones. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I mean, we're a big team, relatively big, at least it feels big to me, and it's global. So it's like around 50 team members. Awesome. We have core management group here in Toronto, but we also have a huge representation in Asia. And in fact, Asian markets are where we're really focusing a lot of efforts right now, because they are typically, highly sophisticated when it comes to cryptocurrencies. No offense to any other markets. They also tend to have a lot of, frequency and turnover, which is obviously very important in an exchange. Now, speaking personally in terms of the vision of the exchange, I just feel like, why should finance be boring, right? Like, why should an exchange be boring? And I find most exchanges are relatively boring. And most finance is relatively boring. So we really wanted to attack the challenge of making, and we're nowhere near where we want to be or need to be in terms of the exchange. We keep iterating and working, but I feel like it should be something that you wake up in the morning, you're excited to take a look at it, you're excited to engage with it. We see long-term vision, BTW, as a place to almost more like a community. We like to call it a value community. I think we want to get away from the commoditization of exchanges. And we have some interesting things coming out in the next few months that I think will carry us through with that vision. Okay. In terms of features of the site that I can't super get into.
Gotcha.
But yeah, they have to do with platform stuff and tokenomics and things like that I think are really interesting. But we see 16, 17, 18-year-old, 19-year-old people growing into the space, right? We want to make it interesting to them. And we also feel like personally, exchanges are relatively boring as it is. And I wouldn't get into an exchange normally as a business venture. I'll just be frank and open. The reason why I wanted to do an exchange is because it's still the biggest major on-ramp of, new users into crypto. And we have a serious moral, philosophical way of looking at our involvement in crypto. We see it as a way to, our mission is to accelerate the world's transition to a crypto economy. Why? Because we think that crypto economics is a provably fairer economic structure than what we have right now. What we have right now, we're dealing with, and it sucks. And we don't feel like, if the world's all of a sudden in a crypto economy, it's going to be this utopia. It's not going to solve all the world's problems. But even if you get 2, 3, 4, 5% more value going back to individuals who don't have a lot of money, that's incredibly meaningful.
Yeah.
Right. There's so much rent seeking that goes on in banking and finance. We speak, a lot of things that there's a lot of stuff going on with social movement, things around identity, right? Skin color. But what about value identity? What about wealth privilege? What about institutionalized financialism? These are things that are I think we got to take a look at too. So, I'm passionate about it. I almost feel it right here.
No, and it's good. It's good to have that passion driving you forward. And I think having that social value / social mission of why of why you got into this space is highly important. It's going to drive, your business forward. One of the reasons I started Cryptocurrent in the first place was to be able to provide education and to bridge the gap between people who knew nothing about cryptocurrency with thought leaders in the space. And by providing that education, we can help lessen the wealth gap, not only here in the States, but everywhere in the world. For the people who don't have access to a lot of institutional money or opportunity, cryptocurrency can be that easy way that you have direct access and you have control of your own money, which has been a challenge throughout all of history and humanity in crypto.
Oh, yeah.
It's taking the first stab at truly tackling that, which is pretty powerful.
Oh, it's hugely powerful. It's you and me were on the same page, and I think so many others are. It's weird how, in crypto, it's like you have these two impulses. You almost have, I think that impulse sometimes gets over, that impulse of like helping other people and things like that, and having kind of like this historical awareness that this could potentially be a way more equitable world financial system than what we have now. It gets overshadowed by, stonks and moon boys and all that stuff. And that stuff is fun and it's exciting. It raises the profile of crypto over time, perhaps, when people make, lots of money at it. But at the end of the day, what we're basically looking at with a transition to crypto economy is hopefully a much more equitable redistribution of wealth, right?
Right.
And I think it's high time that that's come. It's true that the world is, a lot of people don't realize this, but the world is actually overall wealthier and better off than it was 20 years ago by a large margin. But what's happened is that, yes, the entire sea level of wealth has gone up, yes, but the disparity of wealth, as people at the bottom have been lifted up a little bit, the disparity of people at the top is actually increased, right? So yes, there's a much bigger gap here between super wealthy people and not so wealthy people, even though we've all come up,
right?
So and I actually think the reason behind that, or one of the major reasons, is the internet, and the reason why is because we have these centralized filters of Google, Amazon, Facebook that actually are able to that basically took markets that existed more regionally, right, and expanded them to the entire globe, while at the same time getting them filtered through these tiny, tiny centralized filters, if you will,
right,
of their own IP and companies and everything like that. Like the entire global infrastructure of like Google and Facebook and Amazon runs through central entities, and they have concentrated and amassed wealth.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point of the wealth gap disparity that's just happening. It's continuing to happen. And I was having this conversation with someone actually yesterday of how I believe crypto is going to be the instrument that helps bridge that gap for a lot of people, and especially for the ones who find out about it, because there's just so much opportunity in this space to learn and to dominate it. So as it gets to mass adoption, as it continues to appreciate and value, that can be what helps elevate them a lot more quickly than through other traditional ways of wealth creation and building of assets and everything else that helps you to kind of just continue to make that gap a little bit smaller. And another thing that I kind of wanted to ask you, I mean, you've been in this space for almost a decade now. What are some things that are on the horizon that you think others should be looking out for in both the crypto and blockchain space?
I'd say right now, like, be careful about DeFi. Like, really do your research on whatever projects that you're getting into, because it reminds me, it's starting to be reminiscent to me of 2017. And which is good and bad. Like, it's good because, yes, of course we want our space to do well, but just as an individual, be careful about the stuff that you put your chips into. That's would I be lying if I said I didn't lose any value in 2017? Yes, I would definitely be lying. A lot of stuff when it's ICOs that seemed to have a lot of promise at the time, but then in hindsight, it's like, why would I ever have put money into this or that or that or this? But that's sort of like the near term, real narrow thing that I'd say is a piece of advice to look out for. I think that in general, the things that I would say are important to think about are where states headed, where's regulation headed, right? Mm-hmm. We have in China the digital renminbi is now being used. It's in pilot And that is not blockchain. That's not Bitcoin at all. That's actually totally antithetical to blockchain and Bitcoin. It's a ledger entry by a state that's, using that stuff. Same with any idea of like a digital dollar in the United States, right?
Right.
That's totally antithetical to Bitcoin and blockchain. That's just going to be an extra way for people to, at levels of government to track, your dollars, right? I think privacy is super important.
Yeah.
I think privacy is going to be a big deal because right now, chain analysis, a company could potentially find all of your ledger entries, in Bitcoin and in Ethereum. Any public blockchains right now have like a reckoning in the next years. And the reckoning is this.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Oh, I was going to say the reckoning is this, like, do I want people to be like, it's a strength and a weakness that you can have people verify your stuff, right? It's a weakness in the sense that you can figure it out. You can see, do I want, as a business, for example, if I started transacting in Bitcoin, do I want my vendors to know that, I'm paying one vendor less or one vendor more?
Yeah. And
can my vendors know that? Probably. They could figure it out. Business intelligence via like blockchain, like that's a reckoning in terms of privacy and things like that. There's some interesting, like there's some good techniques like CoinJoin and stuff like that. Like for most people, privacy, it's like private enough. Mm-hmm. They're just anonymous because no one cares about them. But like eventually there's going to be a program that cares about you. Like, just like way back when I had a Hotmail account, and who knows what happened in like 2002, I put it into some site and got, pwned, right?
Yeah.
Many years later, some bot is running through a list of pwnable addresses and it gets sold on the dark net. Like don't fool yourself that not getting into it. Like privacy is very, very important.
Yeah. I was actually gonna ask you really quickly to expand a little bit on Chainalysis of how they're kind of like doing that, because actually you're one of the first to tell me a little bit about this. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, Chainalysis is like, they're not like a bad, I don't want to paint them as like some bad entity or anything like that, right? Mm-hmm. They perform actually, great work in terms of sussing out bad actors in the blockchain space, people who are doing bad stuff, right? Like trafficking children or, killing people or, whatever it is, right? Yeah. Like that's, and let's not have any illusions. That stuff is seriously outlier stuff. It's not like happening on this horrible dark web where Bitcoin, like I came into it in the time where people were like, it's only for drugs and killing people, like Bitcoin, right? But let's say that, that you're trying to get funds to an organization that is, kind of a bad, we'll just say we'll pretend they're bad. We just know they're bad rather than like any other thing to the opposite. But they perform a good service in terms of like figuring that stuff out. But the problem would come to, but they expose a problem with both Bitcoin or Ethereum or other chains that are public. And the problem is that it can be found out, right? Mm-hmm. Like unless you're using like a coin mixer or unless you're, using one of the, privacy coins, like some great ones like Beam or Grin or Monero or, Dash or Zcash or whatever. Some of those aren't actually truly private. But unless you're using one of these, it's going to be very easy for, an organization like Chainalysis to figure out. Pretty much like they could like print out like a spreadsheet, just like telling you everything that you did.
Yeah.
Right. So be very afraid. I'm just kidding. But yeah, they're just one example. They're the most successful company, but they have, tons of government contracts.
Right. And I mean, that's a really interesting point of like, with the transparency of it, it can be, like you said, good and bad, and depending on what you're trying to do, or from a business standpoint, personal standpoint, you just kind of got to bring all that into perspective to figure out, how can crypto best serve you. But man, a ton of knowledge and a ton of go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we're getting low on time, so
yeah. No, so I was just going to say, like, before you leave, I just wanted to ask if you could leave us with a final thought that you have for all of our listeners.
My final thought is we've been as humanity has pretty much been under the same framework of value transfer, like a language of value, since we were beating on sticks and things like that, and trying to find tigers. I'd give you 3 pieces of meat if you'd like keep watch for me, that sort of thing. I would either need that to happen directly between you and me, or I need to have a third party to verify that when I came back, like, you're going to guard over these pieces of meat for my friend because I trust you. And so, like, the humanity is now at a point where we can be freed from that sort of value language happening, directly between us. It's an entirely new value language that is getting created by blockchain, by Bitcoin. And please do not underestimate it whatsoever. It's going, it's already changing the world. And just read.
Yeah.
Just read. That's basically it. Just read.
For sure. I think that's a great final. No, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And don't just focus on like following the money. Like, just read about, read primary text, read the Bitcoin white paper, read, if you can get into it, like accessible things about cryptography, or even just fiction, right? Like, spur your imagination.
And to add to that, I think it's a really good idea to not follow the money, just because there are projects that are lucrative in doing whatever, but those are people that are playing the short game. I think crypto and blockchain has such an opportunity to play the long game that if you're following the opportunity, if you're following the true projects that are building to last, that is where getting that knowledge and reading and just becoming more immersed in this space will truly have dividends and pay off in the future. So I appreciate that final thought. And what are some
100%?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I apologize. I just had to, I didn't know if we were ending, and I have to make sure for our community. I said, we're going to do this like thing. And I have to do a shout out to a famous person in the thing. And I'm just going to do a shout out to Hal Finney. Rest in peace.
No, appreciate that. I was actually about to say, like, what are some different ways that people can connect with you, learn about you, and any last words that you'd like to share?
Yeah, you can definitely connect with us through our Twitter. So I think that's BT. Let me just check it right now just to be sure, because I don't want to. And yes, I do know my own Twitter. Okay, guys, don't start getting up in my business about that. It's at btw_.com is our Twitter. We also have a Telegram where I literally, believe it or not, I come to every day. Almost every other day at least. And I say, hey, how's everybody doing? You can ask me anything right now, 20 minutes. So I'm super accessible. You can engage with us there. And that's it. And then awesome podcasts like these, like yours, man. I really appreciate you having me on.
Of course.
It was fun to talk to you. Great interviewing, and I hope you keep cool, because I'm sure it's hot down there right now.
Yeah, it's already starting to heat up for sure. And I really do appreciate your time today, speaking with us, talking to our community, and we'll make sure to get all those links up. And for everyone listening, make sure you go check out btw.com. And for everyone listening, stay cryptocurrent. Today's episode is sponsored by BTW, the most trusted global digital asset exchange. BTW offers users a stable, secure, and fast base for buying and selling digital assets. BTW strives to provide education, ecosystem, growth, and the tools to help people achieve their economic freedom. For more information, go to btw.com.